This is Tony for the A Minute to Midnight show. Earlier today I interviewed Troy Anderson, who co-authored The Babylon Code with Paul McGuire, and I have to say, what a fascinating interview. So tune in, listen right the way to the end. I think you'll find it fascinating just as I did. And don't forget to subscribe to our A Minute to Midnight YouTube channel if you haven't already done so, as we'll be bringing lots more great interviews over the coming weeks. So here is the conversation I had with Troy Anderson. As most of you who listen to our show regularly would know, A Minute to Midnight, we often deal with the influence of secret societies on the world, and today we welcome Troy Anderson to the A Minute to Midnight show. He has co-authored with Paul McGuire a book that deals with this very topic in the light of biblical prophecy. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you very much for inviting me on the show.
It's great. It's great to have you. I've been looking forward to it because I've recently finished reading the book. And it's a great book too, I've got to say. So, Troy, could you please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and of your background?
I've been a journalist for 25 years. I worked at a number of newspapers, including the Los Angeles Daily News, and recently was the editor of Charisma magazine, and a Pulitzer Prize nominee, and a public speaker, and hopefully soon to be filmmaker.
Awesome. So how did it come about that you've partnered with Paul McGuire to write The Babylon Code?
What happened was I was a reporter at the LA Daily News in 2009. And I was writing a story about the Ring Festival, Wagner's Ring Festival at LA. There's a controversy surrounding that. And I was interviewing an opera source, and she had mentioned something about Friedrich von Schiller, who's one of my ancestors. And she had said that there was some celebrations regarding his 250th anniversary of his birth. And so I Googled his name because my grandma had told me about him when I was young, and found that there was some questions about sort of a mystery surrounding his death. And so I did some more Googling and ran across Paul McGuire's website, where he talked about the Illuminati and Bible prophecy at the end times. And I found out he was speaking at an event. And so I asked my editor if I could go to this prophecy conference, and I went there and heard him say that the world is undergoing the most dramatic transformation since the Garden of Eden, transitioning from sovereign nation states to a global government, and all this predicted in the Bible. And so I listened to this, and I wrote a story, and that sort of began this whole journey of investigating, are we in the run-up to these the end-time events predicted in Scripture?
Really, that's really interesting. So when you wrote the book, what did you hope to achieve, and what was your motivation behind writing it?
The reason why we wrote this book is we wanted to sort of wake people up to what's happening. I'm an investigative reporter, and so we thought by combining the knowledge that Paul has gained over several decades of investigating this kind of topic, and my skills, that we could bring some credibility to this. There's all kinds of things out there, exploring secret societies in the end times, but by combining our talents together, we thought we could bring some credibility and scholarship to the topic, and that's what we think we've achieved with the Babylon Code.
Cool. I might actually just read a little piece that from the bottom of page 323 of the book and onto page 324, because I think it kind of, in a nutshell, sums it up in a way. It says, "The reality is that America from the beginning has been a strange synthesis of biblical and Christian beliefs, along with those of the Freemasons, Illuminati, and other secret societies. There's an official version of American history that people learned in school, and then there is the historical reality. Both of these parallel paths have taken America into the present hour as Bible prophecy is now unfolding all around us." And then it says, I'm often asked the question, where is America in Bible prophecy? So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's like that sort of, in a nutshell, sums so much of it up. So just how Christian were the founding fathers, and how much influence from the secret societies was there in the founding of America?
Yeah, so as we looked into that, what we found is that the Pilgrims and the Puritans came here, to escape religious persecution, and really wanted to, create a society that was founded on biblical precepts, and essentially they made a covenant with God. But as time went on, other groups of people came here, members of these other members of secret societies in Europe and other places. And so by the time the Revolutionary War rolled around, and the people we commonly associate with our founding fathers is sort of a mix of, deists, Illuminists, Freemasons, biblical Christians, and other people. So it wasn't truly it wasn't like America was totally founded by Christians, but there's sort of a mix of people and beliefs, so that's the history of America, a little more complicated than sort of the grade school version we were taught.
Yeah, so essentially, what is the Babylon Code? The book, if people are wanting to buy the book, what is it really?
Yeah, the reason why we call it the Babylon Code is there's a prophetic mystery in the Bible that begins in Genesis at the Tower of Babel, and with the story of Nimrod. He's an archetype in the Antichrist, and he presided over what is, considered the first world government, economic system, and a cult-based religion. And then Babylon plays a central role throughout the Bible in the books of the prophets, and then reemerges in Revelation as Mystery Babylon and Babylon the Great. And there's been a lot of debate over the centuries as to what Mystery Babylon is. Some people believe today that it's America, or it's the European Union, it's Rome, it's apostate Christianity, it's just the rebuilt city of Babylon in Iraq today. And so we in the book we explore this prophetic mystery stretching over time, and what exactly is Mystery Babylon that arises in the end times and plays such a large role in the book of Revelation.
So where do you think we are in the prophetic timeline then? Do you see Babylon, the end time Babylon, is really rising now, or has it been rising over a long period of time? Is it getting closer to the fulfillment? Where do you think we might be at?
I believe it's been rising for a long period of time. It's these secret societies that began in ancient Babylon passed down their knowledge to those in Egypt and the Roman Empire, and ultimately Europe and America. So this has been a long-term plan by these groups to bring about this final end time system, this geopolitical, economic, religious system. One of the more interesting things we uncovered in the book is we did over 100 different interviews with everybody from Billy Graham to Dr. Tim LaHaye, Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, Joel Rosenberg, Mark Hitchcock, Greg Laurie, and then also secular experts, Noam Chomsky, professors at Princeton, professors at Oxford and other prestigious universities. And the overwhelming consensus among the faith leaders and prophecy experts is that we are in the run up to the end time events predicted in the Bible, but even more surprisingly is that the consensus among the secular experts is that we're approaching the end of human civilization. In fact, Oxford and Cambridge and some other universities have actually created institutes to study the possible end of human civilization and what can be done to stop it. And Oxford actually released a report here about a year ago, which they listed the 10 top threats to the future of humanity. And one of those was a global totalitarian government. And so that's what we see arising now. It's a continuation of what began in ancient Babylon, and we see it reemerging today.
Yeah, well, the motto of the Illuminists, orb decay, order out of chaos. So I see the world as descending further and further into chaos. Do you think that this is what they'll actually use to bring in the totalitarian world government and ultimately, their despot, their leader, their one world leader that we would think of as the Antichrist?
Yeah, the Bible talks about a great deception, the rise of false prophets and false Christs that'll precede the end of days. And so there'll most likely will probably be some very elaborate, very clever, very possibly subtle deception that will, usher in the Antichrist, who will be the leader of this, this geopolitical, economic, end time Babylonian system. And the Bible talks about that even the very elect Christians will be deceived by this, elaborate hoax or deception. So it's going to be, one thing for us to be aware of is that there'll be many deceptive things that happen that bring about this figure, this Antichrist that the Illuminati and other groups are want to bring into power at some point.
Yeah, I agree. We've dealt with some of these things on A Minute to Midnight quite a bit. I look at Project Bluebeam and think how they could use that for deception. And, I've seen patents for a lot of things that they could use, like, holographic technology and audio, being able to send audio into people's minds and so that they think they're hearing from God or whatever, and there's all kinds of things. I think it may end up being a combination of a whole lot of things. And then, of course, we've got the economic situation globally deteriorating at the moment, which I see they're probably collapsing their own system deliberately so that they can bring in a new one that's cashless and ultimately with a mark of the beast technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest evidences that we are, somewhat near to this whole thing coming about. Is that today we actually have the technology for the first time in history to put into place a cashless society that John in Revelation talks about. We have the surveillance state, we have microchip implants and electronic banking and the internet and just all the technologies would be necessary, to fulfill the prophecy in Revelation that no one can buy or sell without the mark of the beast, whatever that mark is. So that's a good proof that we are getting close to this happening. And then you also have globalism and the whole push for a global government. I mean, here recently we had the United Nations pass this Sustainable Development Plan, the 2030 Agenda, which many believe is just another step towards a system. At the same time, they had the Global Citizen Festival in New York that attracted celebrities and musicians, and there's been this concerted push in the educational system to get kids to think of themselves as global citizens. We had the Paris Climate Change Treaty, which required the governments of the world to agree to try to reduce greenhouse gases and such. And so there's all these treaties and international laws and different steps are being taken to put the system into place. And then we have all these technologies that are now available to bring this about.
Yeah, I'd add TPP and the TTIP and those agreements in there as well. I believe that's part of, they're calling them trade agreements, but they go much further than just trade. So, yeah, all the signs are pointing towards us heading towards a global government. And I look back to Adam Weishaupt in the 1770s or 1776 with the Illuminati, and you look at the goals that he laid out, and it seems to me that we're just following the pattern that was laid out by people like Weishaupt, and only now we have the technology to take it to a level they couldn't do in the 1770s.
Yeah, well, I sort of briefly mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, but so when I was little, my grandma told me I was descended from Friedrich von Schiller, and he's the poet that wrote Ode to Joy that Beethoven set to music in the Ninth Symphony, which is now the anthem of the European Union. And some people believe that'll be the anthem of the New World Order. And so she told me about him, and she told me that he wrote the plays William Tell and Marie Stuart and Don Carlos, which George Lucas cited as an influence in Star Wars. And then she told me that there was some controversy surrounding his death, and he died mysteriously. And so I was always curious about this. And so, after I'd was talking to this opera source for that story, I did some research, and I sort of put all the pieces together, and it turned out that most of his friends in the late 1700s were all members of the Bavarian Illuminati in Germany. He was a professor at the University of Jena. Goethe was a good friend of his, and some other guys that were members of the Illuminati. And so his writings, The Robbers, helped inspire the French Revolution. But then after that happened, he became disillusioned with just the bloody mayhem and everything. And towards the end of his life, he was actually supposedly working on a play to expose the Bavarian Illuminati and their plans to abolish Christianity and overthrow the governments of Europe. And then he died mysteriously, and there was widespread rumors that he was poisoned by the Illuminati or Napoleon or somebody. But there was never any proof of it all. Yeah, the official cause of death was tuberculosis and other ailments. I learned about this, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, is I wanted to find out, are these secret societies that began a couple of centuries ago, are they still involved in trying to bring about this ultimate plan? And so that was interesting to dig into all that and find out what I did. He was buried in a mass grave hastily at night, which was sort of uncharacteristic for a famous writer. And then about 10 years ago, the German authorities decided to exhume his coffin, and the bones that they tested, they exhumed his children's bodies and tested them, DNA test, and it turned out the bones that they have are somebody else's. So we don't even have his body. And they did have samples of his hair, and they found arsenic in his hair. And one of the allegations is that the Illuminati had a doctor that attended him and it slowly poisoned him over a long period of time because they were concerned about what he was writing. So sort of interesting. The third chapter of the book sort of tells the backstory of how Paul and I came together to write the book and how we're sort of picking up where he left off a couple centuries ago.
Yeah, because there was quite a bit of information in the book. Because I already study a lot of the stuff myself, I sort of knew some of the information, but I actually found that particular chapter and what you've just described as one of the most intriguing and fascinating parts of the whole book. It was sort of like, wow, because I had no idea about that. So, yeah, I thought that was brilliant, actually, to have that in there. So straight away on that third chapter, you really had me sold with the rest of the book, I tell you. So that's awesome. So, we were talking about those 1770s, the Illuminati and that. So do you think right from the word go that people like Weishaupt and that had people deliberately infiltrate America?
That was one of the questions I tried to dig into in the book. Is there evidence or proof that the official story, the historians will tell you, is that once the Bavarian government became aware of the Illuminati and their plans, that secret societies were banned in Germany. And so Weishaupt, I think he fled to Russia or something like that. And so the common thinking was that, the Illuminati just sort of disappeared and faded into the mist of history. But if we delve into some of the evidence in the book, George Washington warned of the dangers of the Illuminati in America following the Bavarian government's ban on secret societies. There was widespread allegations that they simply went underground. They infiltrated Freemasonry and other groups and reemerged in America. There were some books talking about that. And then there's also the whole thing with Skull and Bones at Yale University. The Skull and Bones, which is George Bush and the Secretary of State and many other powerful people over the decades have belonged to. That organization has very similar characteristics to the original Bavarian Illuminati and some other different groups at prestigious universities. And that's the interesting thing. Most of these secret societies all began at prestigious colleges and universities. And so there's a decent amount of evidence, and we go into this in the book, that the Illuminati sort of went underground, infiltrated royalty, the university system, the book business, and other places, and and sort of remained underground for a period of time, and sort of pulling the strings behind the scenes. And now today, we see it pretty much everywhere. You watch the Olympics, you watch the Super Bowl, you watch music videos, you watch a movie. The imagery and symbolism and secret messages are pretty much everywhere. So I think put it all together, there's quite a bit of evidence that they still exist and far more powerful than they were a couple of centuries ago.
Yeah, well, I can't remember. Somewhere in the book, I read where there was a statement made that Weishaupt may have been basically commissioned or whatever by the Rothschild family to come up with the Illuminati. And, the Rothschild family, we know now, at this day and age, is probably just as powerful, if not more powerful than they were back then. So, with these things being passed down in bloodlines, you would have to suspect, I think more than suspect, but that they are still big players in the whole system. And also, you look at Karl Marx's manifesto, or the Communist Manifesto later, it pretty much mirrors what Adam Weishaupt had laid out in the 1770s. It wasn't like Karl Marx came up with anything new. He just parroted off what Weishaupt had already written.
Yeah, we talk about that in the book. Yeah, the Illuminati Manifesto and the Communist Manifesto are very similar, and certainly, there's been widespread speculation for centuries now that there's these 13 families, supposed Illuminati families, that trace their ancestry bloodlines back to the ancient world. And in fact, the Rothschild family is claimed that they are descendants of Nimrod. So there's all kinds of strange things that have turned up, and we go into some of this in the book. And this is one thing we tried to do in the book, because if you just go on the internet, you'll see all kinds of stuff, and you wonder, well, is it believable? But in the book, we tried to stick with interviews with highly credible sources, or if we are using documentations from a mainstream news story, or for some academic report, or from books with authors that are credible. So I think that's one thing we've done with this book. I mean, as an investigative reporter, try to put together the best evidence, sort of put all the pieces of the puzzle together in a way that's believable and credible. And the book's got a high rating on Amazon and Audible, and actually this week the book became the number one best-selling prophecy book on Amazon. So we're very excited about it.
That's awesome, because it really is a good book, and it's a great reference resource. I think that's the thing for me. It's like I can have this in my hands, and it's got a lot of the quotes in there and where they came from, and so I can always refer back to it, which to me is really invaluable. And I'm just quoting a little bit then from page 59 again. It says, among the famous people in the world today, you'll find that their rituals are an absolute mirror of the ones that were carried out in Babylon, in Egypt, and the ancient world in general. It's an unbroken span of manipulation from the far ancient world to the present day. And I mean, you look at the rituals at Bohemian Grove and places like that, and it's like paganist rituals that go back for miles, and it's like any sane person would wonder why on earth they have the creation of care ceremony and worshipping a great giant owl, and it's for most people it'd be like pretty out there, but that's what goes on, and these are not some yobbos. These are the high-ranking elites and politicians and those that hold the money in the world.
Yeah, when I first heard about Bohemian Grove in Northern California, I was pretty skeptical. In fact, when I first heard about much of this stuff, I was pretty skeptical. But then you sort of dig into it, and there's I cite some Washington Post stories that talk about these rituals at Bohemian Grove, and the world leaders that go there, and the strange paganistic ceremony they have there that's has connections to like Moloch and Baal and stuff you read about in the Bible and ancient pagan world in Babylon. So it's there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on, and we haven't been told about most of our lives, but now more and more people are waking up to it, and so that's what we hope to do with this book is to help wake people up that there are powerful spiritual forces working in the background and working for centuries and thousands of years to bring about this system, and we need to wake up, sort of emerge from this entertainment news amnesia that everybody's enveloped in, and turn back to God and return to the Bible, because that's really in prayer. That's really the only hope we have to avert what's probably in the works in the next few years or a couple decades, probably at the latest.
It seems to be even Christianity as a whole as well. It's like a great falling away, really. Anything goes, and it's all about prosperity, and there's very little about repentance or seeking God or the traditional things that, well, we grew up, even in the 80s and things, 80s and 90s in the church. It's so different today. It kind of flabbergasts me, really, where it's all going. And so
Yeah, exactly.
we need to turn back to what the Bible actually teaches. It's not all about us getting rich and famous and all the other things and buying $65 million jets and stuff. But also, so the elite secret societies control not only the global financial system, but also the political processes. I just want to read another little quote out of the book, if that's all right. It says, money, or rather political contributions made to politicians, is the key to understanding the influence of the elites. The candidates that people can choose among when they go to the polls are candidates who have already been vetted by the money system, and these are all people who have the support of the elites, or they wouldn't be on the ballots to begin with. And so the choices that Americans have when they go to the polls are constrained by the role of money and the power of the economic elites. So where does that leave us with 2016 elections in America?
Yeah, I was a political reporter for many years, and when I started digging into this and discovering this, that was actually a quote from Martin Gylens, who's a professor at Princeton. He's a political science professor, and he had taken an interest in this whole topic and did a study on it, and asked the question, how much influence do regular people have in the political process, and how much influence do the elites have? And so he thought that the result would probably be, sure, the elites have quite a bit, but the people still have, because we're a democracy, still have a great deal of power too. But what he found was it was the exact opposites. The elites have almost all the power, and the regular Joe Blow citizen has almost none now. And so it turned. I mean, if that study is true, and he's a professor at Princeton, it would suggest that pretty much the whole political system is rigged now, and it's sort of a big charade. So yeah, as we move into the 2016 elections, what are we ultimately going to be choosing from? Unfortunately, I mean, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from voting, because I believe it's very important. It's the foundation of our nation. But you have to wonder if the only candidates we're presented with have already been sort of chosen beforehand, and how accurate is our voting system today with all the electronic voting. There's been questions raised about that, so it's very, very troubling.
Yeah, and there's a lot of distraction from real issues too. I mean, being in New Zealand here, we've been presented with a vote on a new flag. They've distracted us by voting on a silly new flag. Meanwhile, they gave us a referendum even on it. But issues like TPP, we have absolutely no say, and it's pretty much railroaded, even though half the population, or I don't know many people that support it. Most people are against it, but they railroad through this legislation, and same things happened in America, and we're left to like it or lump it, and then the mainstream media doesn't report on the true number of protesters. They said there was a few hundred protesters at the signing in Auckland. All the countries involved signed it up in Auckland last week, and they said a few hundred protesters. Well, I've seen pictures, photos, streets crowded with 25,000 protesters, but you didn't see that in the mainstream media. because the mainstream media is largely complicit in this whole thing because it's owned by those few elite corporations. So it doesn't paint a pretty picture, but so ultimately, what do we do? What can we do?
Well, yeah, I think that you raise a very important point here. I mean, I was a member of the mainstream media for a couple of decades, and whenever you try to talk about this kind of stuff, I read one of Jim Marrs' books back in 2000 when I first went to work for the LA Daily News, Rule by Secrecy. That was sort of like my big introduction to this whole topic. And I happened to mention a couple of things with my editor. She goes, "Shh, that's crazy talk. We don't talk about that around here." And so.
Yeah.
And then later on, I found out that almost all the media in the world is owned by either the big banks or these wealthy elite, and so I interviewed Jim Marrs, who's a New York Times best-selling author. He used to be an investigative reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and he told me that when he started digging into this kind of stuff back in I think in the 80s, he found out that the elite actually have sort of operatives at each of the large newspapers throughout the country to sort of help control the editorial board, so that nobody sort of steps out of line, and so there's just all kinds of shocking things like that. So I agree with you. There's the media's job is sort of distract everybody as they're putting this global system into place. This is literally the biggest story in the world, and it's the mainstream media completely ignores it. If they are truly creating a global government economic system that the Bible predicts is ultimately going to enslave us, and a vast majority of the world's population is going to die, this is a gigantic story that needs to get out there. And but we are being fed this line and all this distraction and diverted and distracted, and so most people are generally unaware of what's happening. So I think the most important thing is become aware of what's happening. And from a spiritual perspective, at this point, probably the only thing that we could do to stop this is to appeal to God. I interviewed Billy Graham here a few years ago, and he said that the signs of the end of the age are converging for the first time since Jesus made those predictions. And he wrote an open letter to America, and he called it an open letter to America and its deceived people. And he called on people to return to God, to repent of their sins and turn back to the Lord. And he cited the example of Jonah. When God sent Jonah to Nineveh, of course, Jonah didn't want to go, but when he finally went there and warned people that God was going to judge them, they repented and judgment was averted. And so Billy Graham told me he believes the same thing can happen again if we simply just turn back to God. That essentially, I believe, and my co-author believes, and many people believe that this sort of prophetic scenario we see unfolding before our eyes right now would maybe get postponed or delayed. Of course, Bible is ultimately going to come true, but if we do what we're supposed to do and return to the Lord, this will probably defeat these evil forces that are trying to bring this whole thing about now.
And even if not enough people do that, on an individual level, it's still good for us to do that anyway, and allow God to protect us in whatever is coming, because I believe, also that we can expect to hear from God and get guidance as to what to do individually. Should we move somewhere? Should we stay? What should we do? How can we protect ourselves, etc. So we can't go wrong by putting ourselves into prayer and seeking God and repenting. I mean, I think we all have things that we can go with there. Just another thing, as you were speaking, I was thinking, the catchphrase is anybody like us who's coming up with this stuff, we're labelled as conspiracy theorists. In other words, the stuff's going on, but they will make us try to marginalise us by calling us conspiracy theorists or tinfoil hat wearers. And meanwhile, they continue to hide in the shadows and do what they're doing. And those that seek to expose them are basically, ridiculed.
Well, this is one thing we want to try to accomplish. I'm a Pulitzer Prize nominated investigative journalist, and As an executive editor of Charisma magazine, one of the nation's largest Christian publications. And so with the Babylon Code, what we seek to do is sort of mainstream this entire topic. We're trying to sort of bring it into the light of day. And I agree with you. The term conspiracy theorist is used to discredit those who would look into this. But as an investigative journalist, this is a gigantic story and demands that somebody dig into it and find out if it's true or not. And that's what we sought to do here. And so I think in this book, it's probably the first book by a mainstream reporter that's looked into this topic and brought together all kinds of interviews, all kinds of evidence, and cited mainstream sources, tons of documentation, and people have read it. It's been endorsed by Dr. Tim LaHaye, Pat Boone, Sid Roth, Rabbi Jonathan Bernis. We're just on his program this week, and the reactions we've heard is everything from if you read one book the rest of your life, read this one, to this is you'll be shocked by what you learn in this book, to the vice president of Hachette. He said he took the book to the beach before it was published, and he read it, and he said after he got done, he felt like going up and down the beach and telling everybody to sell everything they had because the time is short and we need to get the word out. We need to wake up the church and wake up the world.
Yeah, I see another one of the endorsers was Michael Snyder, whom I have a great respect for. I actually interviewed him about a couple of weeks ago. And, of course, he deals a lot with the economic ramifications of what's going on. But yeah, you're right, because of who has written this book and the way it's put together with quotes and it's very hard for people, I think, anyone to read this, how can they deny it? Because the evidence is so compelling, and I thoroughly recommend that people get a hold of a copy of the book and read it and hang on to it and use it for a reference resource. So where can people actually find the book?
Yeah, so the Babylon Code is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, most Christian bookstores. You can find out that the landing page of the main website is faithwords.com/Babylon Code, or they can go to my websites, troyanderson.us. It's also available, Target, Walmart, and many other different retailers.
And it's a pretty striking looking book. It's a nice hardcover, big book. The print is pretty easy to read, and everything. It's a nice, well presented book. I've got to say. So, have you got any other thoughts that you'd like to add in closing, Troy?
Yeah, I guess if people would pray for us, we're hoping to turn the book into a film to try to get this message out to a much larger audience. A book will reach a certain number of people, but a film can reach far more. So if people would pray that the Lord would bring that about, that would be great.
Awesome. So, well, it's been really great having you on the show today, Troy. And thanks so much for sharing with our audience your insight into the past, present, and prophetic future of America and the world. So it's been awesome to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So there you have it. That was the interview I conducted today with Troy Anderson, the writer, along with Paul McGuire of the Babylon Code. Now, as I suggested earlier, please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. And also, we greatly appreciate it when people like the YouTube video and also leave comments. They're very welcome, and we certainly read them all. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening to this A Minute to Midnight broadcast, and we will have some other great interviews coming up in the very near future.